I'm absolutely thrilled to be with you today, and my apologies that I couldn't do this live. I'm traveling today and got some of the dates mixed up, but I do want you to know that I'm going to be in the chat watching this back with you. So if you have any questions or concerns throughout the presentation today, just put your question in the chat and I'll be glad to answer in real time. So my name is Scott Lloyd. I am an assistant professor of communication studies and coach of speech and debate at the University of Jamestown. And it is my privilege today to speak to you on the topic of preparing a keynote address. Now, the number one fear in America, right above death, is public speaking. That means that most people would rather be dead in a box than standing behind a podium delivering a message or a keynote. But as business women, as leaders, all of you are asked to wear different hats, and sometimes you're called upon to make a keynote address or to give some sort of presentation. And given the statistics in America, I know that all of us struggle at times with doing this and feeling as if we are doing it effectively. So today I want to share with you something that I believe is helpful and memorable and that you can apply to any circumstance or any situation, whether you're speaking to 1 or 100 people. These elements of a particular speech or keynote will help you to deliver professional and effective speeches and presentations. So remember that when you are called upon to give a speech, that people generally are rooting for you to succeed. I don't think any of us have ever gone to a speech or presentation where we're like, I hope this is the worst thing in the world. I hope the person just embarrasses themselves and trips over their words. None of us want to sit through that. If we are paying with our time and attention and sometimes our finances to hear someone speak, remember that your audience, generally speaking, has a good disposition towards you as the speaker. So a lot of times the nerves that we feel, the communication apprehension, commonly known as stage fright, it comes from this idea that maybe people don't like us or those negative words that we sometimes speak to ourselves. But I want you to understand something. If you are a business person, if you are a leader, and generally speaking to the audience today, because you are women, you are uniquely qualified to speak to the world about your experience and what you have to offer. So remember that your audience wants you to succeed. And the sooner that you can tell yourself that and convince yourself of that, the better speaker you're going to be. So never underestimate the fact that you have something to say, that your voice is important and what you share is important for the world to hear. So wherever your audience may be, whether it is a small town or a large metropolitan area, a small business, a large business, a conference or a gathering, or just one-on-one, if you apply the principles that I'm going to share with you today, I believe that you can be a successful speaker in any situation or circumstance. So remember, the first thing to do is to learn to manage those feelings of fear and apprehension. Absolutely. I wish I could tell you that there was a magic pill that you could take to make it go away. Unfortunately, those kinds of pills don't exist. If you do take one, it is likely that you will probably forget everything that you say. So don't take them. And here's what you can do. Remember, those feelings of fear, those feelings of apprehension are never, ever going to go away completely. So embrace them and then turn that energy back into your presentation. I tell my students all the time that I've been speaking and and doing events like this for years. But the feelings of fear and apprehension and stage fright, they never fully disappear. And the stomach, the butterflies in the stomach, they never go away. But the goal is to get those butterflies to fly in formation. So in the next few moments, I'm going to share with you what I call the 4 parts of a speech. Sometimes I affectionately refer to them as Lloyd's laws of speaking, and there's only 4 of them. And if you can commit these 4 parts of a speech, these 4 laws to memory, they will serve as a template for delivering effective public presentations in any setting. So the first one, the first law of public speaking is this: start a fire. Start a fire. Now, obviously, this is a metaphor, right? I don't mean for you to literally start a fire, although that would gain the attention of your audience. What you want to do is you want to speak from your passion. So remember that if you don't care about what you're talking about, then your audience is unlikely to care about it as well. But if you are speaking from a place of passion, a place of desire, a place of enthusiasm and energy, that enthusiasm and that passion is contagious. So sometimes students are like, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. How do you discover your passion? Well, because you are a leader, because you are leading businesses in many cases, it is likely that in many respects, you've discovered your passion. But just in case you're still refining what it is that you are passionate about when it comes to life, there are 3 questions that you can ask yourself. What makes you mad? What makes you glad? And what makes you sad? What makes you mad? What makes you glad? And what makes you sad? If you're watching a television show or a movie and you find yourself getting mad, sad, or glad at different parts of the movie, and you look around the room and your family or significant other or loved ones or whoever you're watching the movie with aren't sad, mad, or glad, then whatever you're sad, mad, or glad about in the movie is probably a good indication of where your passion lies and how you are wired to interact with the world. And so when you can answer those big questions about what makes you sad, mad, or glad, and where those concentric circles intersect one another, then that is likely a good indication of your passion. And when you have opportunities to speak, you want to talk about those things that make you sad, mad, or glad. Why? Because that passion will come through for those particular issues, and your audience will be happier to listen to you because you won't be boring, or at least not as boring, right? There's no guarantee that they may be as passionate about the subject as you are. But here's one thing I can guarantee: if you have no passion for your subject, then your audience isn't going to care about what you're talking about, and they're going to check out immediately and completely, and they're unlikely to come and listen to you speak again. So speak from your passion and start a fire. Starting a fire simply means to gain the attention of your audience and to keep the attention of your audience while you are speaking. Now, there are many ways to do this. One way is just to start speaking with your passion and with your nonverbals engaged, and people will hear the enthusiasm in your voice. A lot of times you can start with a quote. You can talk about a statistic. You remember I opened this presentation by sharing that the number 1 fear in America is public speaking, right above death. So that immediately set the stage for what I was going to be talking about and how I was going to be communicating throughout this presentation. Another good way to gain and keep the attention of your audience is to ask a question, to ask a rhetorical question, because a rhetorical question has a way of interrupting the inner dialogue, the thought process that everyone is going through in the audience, and you're able to gain their attention immediately. For instance, if I were to open a presentation by asking the question, how many of you have a dog? Immediately, whatever you were thinking about previous to my question was interrupted, and you immediately started thinking about the fact that you don't have a dog, or that you do have a dog and that you miss your dog. And whatever kind of dog you have, whether it's a big ferocious dog or a cute little lap dog, you immediately started thinking about the loyalty and the pleasure and the love that you feel for your dog. When I say the word dog, you might have a completely different context. In fact, some of you may have thought about your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend. Whatever the case might be, whatever you were thinking about, immediately, right, you started thinking about something else. And I had your attention momentarily, but I gained your attention. And now, as a speaker, it's my job to build upon gaining that attention and move forward in the presentation. The most important thing that you can do in every presentation, first of all, is start a fire. The great Baptist preacher and seminary professor Charles Spurgeon of the 19th century, he would tell his seminary students, if you want people to come out and hear you preach, take a can of kerosene, pour it over your head, and people will come out just to watch you burn. Now, obviously, he didn't mean that literally, but he was using it as a metaphor to communicate the fact that if you're going to speak about anything, then you need to speak from your passion, because in that way, you can gain the attention of your audience and you can keep the attention of your audience throughout the speech. Because if you don't have their attention and if you don't have the ability to keep their attention, then the information is going to be lost on them. So start a fire. Speak from your passion. And remember that you will continue to do this throughout the speech, because people's attention spans are really, really short. And so you want to make every word count and use an economy of words. And always, 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 the general rule of public speaking is the shorter, the better, right? Keep it short, keep it sweet, and keep it to the point, right? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And if you'll remember that throughout your speech, your audience will appreciate everything that you have to say and will applaud what you have to say, because at the very least, they recognize that you aren't wasting their time. So start a fire. Remember, if your audience goes to sleep on you, it's not their fault. As a speaker in this context, even though we are speaking across the virtual platform, I have a responsibility to keep you awake. And it becomes even harder and more difficult in virtual spaces, right? Because I'm not physically in the room with you. But I have to work on keeping you awake by changing the inflection of my voice. Consider how I've been up and down and all around with my voice. And that's something that you can practice. And that's a skill that you can learn to incorporate into your public presentations. Think about the fact that if I was speaking in a monotone fashion, something like this: hello, welcome to our presentation. I am very excited to be with you today, and I'm about to share with you the 4 laws of public speaking. Number 1, start a fire. Most of you have already gone to sleep, right? Because my voice isn't interesting. There's no inflection. So remember that you've got to change the pace. You've got to change the volume from time to time. Sometimes you want to speak louder to gain or to regain your audience's attention. And sometimes strategically, You may want to slow down the pace and speak in a lower tone, a more controlled voice, and draw the audience in and make them hang on every single word. You see what I did there? You can change it up and you can have fun with your voice. And the great thing about a voice is that you have one, and the world needs to hear that voice. So play with your voice, practice with your voice, change it up, go up and down and all around. And remember that that is very important to gaining and keeping the attention of your audience. So the number one thing that you want to do in every speech, presentation, keynote address is start a fire. Number two, you want to build a bridge. Build a bridge. So obviously this is a metaphor as well. So you want to think about the fact that between you and your audience is an invisible moat that you have to bridge because you are taking them on a journey. You are leading them somewhere that they need to go and that you want them to go. But in many respects, they have no idea where they're going. So as a speaker, it's your job to reach across that chasm and to take them by the hand and to lead them. Now, there's many ways that you can do this rhetorically with your voice, but obviously there's some nonverbals involved as well. You want to make eye contact with your audience, and you want to move that eye contact around the room because this communicates that you're actually engaging with the audience. And for some people, this is one of the most difficult parts of a speech, right? Because you've got your material in front of you, and the temptation is to read your speech. You do not want to read your speech. People do not listen to presentations. They listen to conversations. And so you want to attempt to speak in a nice conversational style. And part of this is making eye contact with the audience, because if you were speaking with someone one-on-one and you refuse to look them in the eye, then that would be taken as this person doesn't have a lot of confidence or they're not interested in me, so I'm just going to move on. If you ever think about the fact of trying to talk to someone from the other room, if you're in one room and they're in the other room and you're lifting your voice and shouting, right? Inevitably, what happens? One of you gets up and walks into the threshold of the room where at least you can see one another and make eye contact, because it's easier to communicate with people and to people that you can see and make eye contact with them. So a great way to maintain this bridge that you're building, especially if you're speaking to a larger audience and you don't know who to look at, you don't have any friends in the audience, try this. Just find 3 friendly faces. Maybe one friendly face on your left, one friendly face in the middle, and one friendly face on the right. And make up your mind that I'm going to look these people in the eye throughout my presentation, and just make that progression from left to right or from right to left, however you choose to do it. And from the audience's perspective, as you are speaking, it will appear to them that you're making eye contact with the entirety of the audience, when in reality, you're most likely looking at just 3 people. And this will help you establish rapport with the audience because you're not avoiding eye contact with them and they feel like that you are looking at them. Also, this helps you maintain the audience's attention throughout the presentation. If I'm reading from a script and I'm rarely looking up, then my audience is going to be drifting. They're going to be doing other things. But if on occasion I'm making eye contact with them or with someone in their area, they are going to be more tuned in because they know that I'm paying attention not only to what I'm saying, but I'm paying attention to who's paying attention to me. So give that eye contact and give that smile, especially at the beginning of your presentation. Pretend like you're in a toothpaste commercial and smile, because it does something for your audience. It puts them at ease. It communicates friendliness. It communicates kindness. It communicates competence and confidence. And it puts you at ease. And when it puts you at ease, it tends to put the audience at ease as well. So smile, maintain eye contact, share something about yourself. If there's something that you can talk about that really illustrates who you are or where you come from or what you might be about, remember that the feelings involved in the human experience are pretty universal. All of us share common fears. All of us share common joys. All of us share common dreams and aspirations. So, in building a bridge and establishing rapport with your audience, those are ideas and thoughts that you can share that will be helpful in maintaining that relationship throughout your particular keynote. Start a fire, build a bridge, tell us something about yourself, tell us something about your passion, tell us something about your credentials, about your work. If you can be lighthearted about yourself and make yourself the butt of a joke or two, people always perceive that. People always perceive that as something that is positive and that is something that is helpful. If you can communicate to your audience that you're not taking yourself all that seriously, that can be very, very helpful to your audience. So start a fire, build a bridge. And the third thing that you want to do in every speech and in every presentation is you want to give an example. Give at least one example. Now, depending on the length of your keynote, depending upon the length of your talk, you may want to give multiple examples. But in every speech and in every presentation, you want to give at least one example. And remember that presentations are boring, but stories are interesting. We want to hear a story. We want to hear a story, especially about you, a personal story, because that makes you real. That goes beyond a one-dimensional view and perspective of you as the speaker. And you open yourself up in a vulnerable passion, in a vulnerable fashion through telling a story, by communicating those emotions and communicating in that structure. For instance, when I think I was 12 or 13, and my mother, I was one of those kids that I was always hanging around my mom. My dad was, busy working and things of that nature, and I was always up in my head. And so my mom was looking for opportunities to keep me busy, and so she signed me up for the 4-H oratorical contest. Now, in my small rural Arkansas community, we had a 4-H club, and I thought it was all about cows and horses and pigs. But apparently, my mother discovered that there was an opportunity for public speaking as well. And I got real excited, at least initially, right? I was like, this is my thing. This is an opportunity to prove myself. And so all week long, I worked really, really hard on my speech. I threw in some quotes from Benjamin Franklin and Ronald Reagan. He was president when I was growing up, and I was all excited to deliver my speech and presentation. But then, oh man, then the dreaded day came when I had to deliver my first speech. So my mom put me in the car. I was wearing my Sunday best, a suit and tie, and we drove around the place I was supposed to give my speech. Seemed like hours, because I was literally freaking out. I was scared to death to deliver that speech. I didn't have any fear, any apprehension when I was preparing the speech, but when it came time, crunch time, game time to deliver the speech, I was having akin to a nervous breakdown. But my mother, being the tenacious woman that she was, wasn't going to let me off that easily. And so finally, through much persuasion, she convinced me to get out of the car, to walk into that place, to step up to the podium and to deliver my speech. And finally, and rather reluctantly, I did so. I stepped to the podium, and like a virtual Cicero, I belted out that speech to everyone in the room. And to my surprise, I did a good job. Now, I know this, right? Because all four people in the audience told me that I had done so. And so that's my initial story of overcoming communication apprehension and learning to deliver speeches and to continue to deliver them effectively. So I want you to notice what I did there. You see, I told a story, and it is likely that we're towards the middle of my presentation now. And so it's likely that some of you were tuning out. Maybe you were getting distracted by your phone or by your thoughts or something else that was happening. But I promise you that when I started telling that story, that personal story about me being in the car, 12, 13 years of age, reluctant to give a speech, my mom convincing me to do so, that there was something in you that tuned in. There was maybe you leaned forward because you were listening in a way to that story unlike you were listening to the rest of my presentation. Now, you were listening, but you were listening more closely to the story. Why? Because that's how human beings are wired. We listen to narratives. We listen to stories. So remember, in your keynote, you want to have at least one example. Multiple examples are fine. Personal stories are the best because no one can disagree with our experience or deny our experience. And then if you can weave those stories in your presentation like a tapestry, they will land effectively in the hearts and minds of your listeners. So give some examples of what you are talking about. And then this brings us to the end of our presentation, right? At the end of your presentation, number 4, you want to encourage action. Encourage action. What do I mean by that? So at the end of your speech, at the end of your keynote, at the end of your presentation, you want to tell your audience what you want them to do, how you want them to feel, or what you want them to think about the information that you have shared. And it may take the form of an action, actually doing something. It may take the form of challenging them to think differently about a problem or a solution or a perspective. Or you may just want them to feel. You may want to just stir emotions in them because emotions are a powerful motivator and can motivate people to take some sort of action. But remember, you want to spell this out for your audience so they know clearly what to do, how to think, or how to feel about the information that you've shared. And sometimes you can weave it together and it may be a combination of all three. For instance, listening to this speech today, something that I want all of you to do is I want you to think about how your next keynote, how your next presentation can be improved by these particular laws of public speaking. Start a fire, build a bridge, give an example, and encourage action. How does that template make a difference in you making a presentation? Well, first of all, it gives you an outline to work by, right? You don't have to think about Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, although those kinds of outlines can be helpful. All you got to think about is 4 blanks that you have to fill in on your speech template. And here's a great rule of thumb. Instead of starting with number 1, start a fire, Start with number 3. Give an example. What are the stories that you want to tell? What are the examples that you want to give that support the thesis or the aim of your presentation? Work on those stories, get those established, and think about how you're going to tell those stories. And then think about what you want your audience to do, feel, or think based upon the information that you've shared with them. What are the takeaways that you want your audience to remember? How do you want to design those takeaways? How do you want to craft those takeaways so that they're mental Velcro? They stick to the brain of your audience. How do you want to deliver that in a way that is memorable and that is portable, that they can take with them? Either they're taking notes and it's very simple to do so, or they remember particular moments in the presentation and in the speech. And if they forget a lot of the details, they remember those main points because you've made them memorable. So instead of starting at the beginning, start in the middle. Work on the examples, the stories that you want to tell. Think about how you want to end. What are the big takeaways? And then once you have that prepared, go back to the beginning and think about, okay, what's the best way to introduce this subject? Maybe one of the stories that I'm going to tell in the middle, maybe I can tell the end of that at the very front and create suspension and suspense and create a surprise for my audience. So the difference between suspense is where the audience knows what's going to happen, but they don't know exactly when it's going to happen. So the way to build suspense into your presentation is to start with the ending of your story. You get up and say, and that's how I made $1 million. Now, aren't all of you interested in how I made $1 million? I don't have $1 million, by the way, but you see the point, right? Now you're really listening because you want to find out. It builds suspense in the hearts of the audience because they want to find out what's going on. Or you may want to build to a surprise that you reveal later on in the speech. So you might open by telling a story about yourself or asking a question that everybody can universally relate to. And then when you get to the examples, you may want to surprise your audience by telling them something like, the greatest beneficiary of the information that I'm sharing with you today is myself. And here's how it impacted me. Once upon a time, I was a shy kid from rural Arkansas, very reluctant to give a speech. But because my mother insisted that I join this oratorical contest, a contest that I ended up winning state at, because she insisted that I work on this craft, from this came these principles, and these principles help me today in a variety of situations and circumstances to speak to audiences in all kinds of situations. In fact, if you've been listening closely, you'll realize that in me presenting this presentation on Start a Fire, Build a Bridge, Give an Example, and Encourage Action, I have done exactly that. I started a fire, I built a bridge, I gave you an example, and I encouraged action. So the very template that I'm sharing with you today, I have utilized in crafting and delivering this speech and presentation to all of you on being an effective keynote speaker. And here's the good news. This isn't rocket science. This is something that you can learn. This is something that you can experience. This is something that you can practice in any situation, in any circumstance. And the reason that most people do not grow into becoming good speakers is because when they are given the opportunity to speak, we're reluctant to do so, right? Somebody might ask you to give a speech or presentation or speak to a group and you're like, oh no, that's not my thing, I'm too shy. Here's the thing, all of us are shy to an extent. All of us on a spectrum, right, deal with insecurities and fears. All of us on a spectrum deal with those negative voices that get into our head and our hearts, the imposter syndrome that we have to deal with on a daily basis. But what if you said yes to the opportunities to speak in public? Here's what will happen. You will get better, because anything that you do more than once, you will improve at it. I guarantee it. In fact, there have been multiple studies that have been conducted that if people will take just one communication course, it will greatly improve their confidence. Warren Buffett famously said that he was willing to pay, I believe it was $100,000 for 10% of the future earnings of a college graduate. And he said, I'll add an additional $50,000 if you take one public speaking course. That was the value that he placed on the ability to communicate in public. So remember, when somebody gives you an opportunity, say yes to that opportunity and use this template: start a fire, build a bridge, give an example, encourage action in every circumstance, in every situation. And by doing so, it will help you to become a better speaker, because your voice matters. Your voice is important. It's very important for the world to hear your story. If you look at all of the sacred texts, whether it's the Bible or the Quran, or it's wisdom literature, there's something that you will discover in all of those texts that they share in common. And it's this: nothing happened until someone opened their mouth and said something. Yes, people did great things, all of those legends and all of those, that myth that developed over time that informs either our religion, our perspective, our philosophy, or our way of life. But think about the great stories and think about the men and the women who dared to open their mouth and say something. I happen to be a Christian, so in my tradition, when I open up the Bible, there on the very first page is that Bible verse that says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God, here it is, moved upon the face of the waters. And God did what? Said, let there be light. So everything was chaos. Everything was disordered. Everything was in darkness until God opened his mouth and said something. So if that's true of God, how much more so would it be true of us, that the moment we choose to share our voice, to share our passion, to share our ideas, to share information with the world that proceeds from our heart and our mind, if we do that, I guarantee you things will happen. Your voice matters. Speak your truth into the world. How do you do that? Start a fire, build a bridge, give an example, and encourage action. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this is something that you can take with you. And the next time you speak, remember, you are the speaker that everyone wants to hear, because you have something important to say and share with the world. I'm going to hang around in the chat. So if you have some questions or comments, reach out to me. My email address is Scott, SCOT LOYD, the number 1 at gmail.com. That's Scott Lloyd 1 at gmail.com. 1 T, 1 L. My family couldn't afford the extra consonants. Scott Lloyd 1 at gmail.com. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Catherine, for the opportunity to speak at this Women's Business Conference, and I look forward to doing so again in the future. Everybody have a great day. And remember, start a fire, build a bridge, give an example, encourage action. You're the speaker, that everyone wants to hear.